In one of my favourite Eat the Rich moments, another golf course will be closed down to build public housing and facilities. 80% of us live in public housing, a number so unremarkable to us, but to anybody else, unbelievable. To a foreigner, the words public housing may mean vertical slums and Soviet-era housing, but to Singaporeans, it's just a way of life. Why is that? And how did we get here? Our story begins again with the British, who had just bought the islands of Singapore. The free port of Singapore was booming, but most of the working class were facing overcrowding, living in slums and tenements. Hence, the Singapore Improvement Trust was created to address Singapore's most serious urban infrastructure issues. However, like Manchester United, they weren't very good at their jobs. The SIT faced a big hurdle, land, or rather, the lack thereof, which is kind of weird considering that Singapore was mostly rural then. Turns out, much of the land had been quickly resold to businessmen for large plots of pepper, gambia and rubber plantations to turn a quick profit. As such, the British enacted the Land Acquisition Ordinance, which allowed them to legally purchase land for public works, which they did. Yay! Finally, housing for all! Nope, to build army camps. Post-independence, the PAP government took it one step further with the Land Acquisition Act, which allowed the government to acquire any private land for any reason at below market prices. And there was no way to say no. In contrast, across the border, the right to be properly compensated for your land is protected by the Malaysian Constitution. Notably, such a clause was missing in the Singapore Constitution post-independence, even though we adopted the rest of the Malaysian Constitution. Former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew argued that the urgent need to develop the country could not be fulfilled without some infringement on the rights of the property owners for the greater public good. Without such a clause, the Land Acquisition Act could be swiftly passed post-independence to prevent the unscrupulous landlords from earning disproportionate profits from the sale of land to the government using public money. But surely such a policy will be hugely unpopular, especially with the rich. Just ask the Arab families. The Alkafs, the Alsagoffs and the Aljunied families owned and lost much of the land in downtown Singapore. Many landowners were reluctant to give up ownership of their land due to the sentimental value. And for the squatters who had no legal stake in the land that they were renting, they were only compensated for the improvement works that they made. Which meant that at one point in time, there were HDB officers measuring trees, chasing and counting chickens, ducks and pigs just to determine a fair compensation value for their eviction. Wielding the power of the Land Acquisition Act, the government now owned more than 90% of Singapore's land. With land consolidated and ready for development, HDB jumped into the thick of it and started constructing HDBs so quick that the National Good newspaper declared that HDB was building one flat every 45 minutes. In just 5 years, HDB had built more than double the units constructed by SIT in the past 32 years. By the late 90s, there were virtually no more villages left in Singapore. Housing was finally available and within reach for Singaporeans who would otherwise be renting tenements from grubby landlords. With such tight control on land, the low supply of private housing meant that private property is way out of reach for first-time buyers. Wow, look, rich people house. I wish I could stay here. This gives virtually no other option for a fresh graduate who wants to start a family, but to get one from the HDB. So there you have it, and you already know the answer. Singapore just does not have enough land to build bungalows for everyone. But the journey to HDB as the default form of housing is a long one, and the Land Acquisition Act is only just the beginning.